And the conclusion that they published was that the teaching of evolution in the Australian education system has been very successful. And this is essentially responsible for, turning a lot of people away from God. Some people, of course, have adopted some sort of theistic evolution approach. And one of the other things, of course, is that people in general are not aware of the growing evidence that we have that life on Earth is not very old at all. There's very, very strong evidence accumulating now that will be discussed later. There's also been tremendous censorship of anything to do with the teaching or anything to do with the teaching of the evidence that supports creation in Australia. Now, back in the late 70s, Dr. Dwayne Gish, who was a UC Berkeley trained biochemist, did a tour in Australia. And at the time, Neil Gray was at the University of Melbourne. Now, a lot of the senior chemical engineers in Australia, professors at the University of Melbourne, at the University of Queensland, were taught by Neil Gray when he was at Melbourne University, and he was a creationist. He was formerly the most senior engineer chemical engineer for BHP. And when he invited Dwayne Gish to give a talk at Melbourne University, he was actually called in by the Dean and said, if you want to keep your job here, don't do that again. Now, that was back in the 70s. And so we've had this education system where there's been huge censorship of the knowledge that we now have that supports creation.